And why? Oh, there it is. Hello, everyone. Steve Hellwagon here, and I am pinch hitting tonight for Mark Rogers in the pilot seat for Ohio State Buckeyes Live. We have Kevin Noon of Buckeye Grove is with us, and Tony Gerdeman. It's easy for me to say from the Ozone. He is here as well, and we hope to be joined by Buckeye Grove is with us. Oh.
Sorry, that's my fault.
We hope to be joined by Buckeye Claire later on. And guys, we have a whole list of stuff to talk about here tonight. Verbal commitments that Ohio State has gotten in really the last month. I jotted down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 verbal commitments in the last 3 or 4 weeks, and of course a couple more here just in the last week that we did not talk about last week, and several more who are supposed to commit in the weeks ahead. We want to talk about questions for Ryan Day, the Ohio State head coach, who will be in Chicago next Thursday, which will be July 18th, it looks like. And that will be Ohio State Day at the Big Ten meetings in Chicago. So you can watch Big Ten Network all day and get your fix there of Ryan Day. And he's got 3 seniors who are going as well. It was Jordan Fuller, KJ Hill, and who am I missing on the other one? Jonathan Cooper. Okay, thank you, Kevin. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Obviously, we've been talking a little bit about position groups as well. Last week we did the linebackers, and we'll get into the wide receivers as well. So I will say hello, Kevin. Everything good in your world? You were not with us last week on vacation. How was vacation?
Vacation was great. Spent the whole time in the pool, at the bar, at the pool bar. With a lot of recruiting going on, obviously, I kept an eye on things, but not too close of an eye. So it's good being back at it.
All right. And Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone as well is with us tonight. Tony, how are you doing?
Good. I spent my drinking at home last week, so sorry.
Okay, Lostima.
Well, I actually had a little junket last weekend as well. My daughter, who's going to be a senior in high school, wanted to get out of the state and go take a look at North Carolina and Duke for her college trip. She's also been to Ohio State and Miami of Ohio. Her mother went to Miami. I went to Ohio State. I don't want to prejudice this, but I think it's going to be one of those two. But we definitely enjoyed our time down in the Triangle area there, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, and enjoyed Duke is just a phenomenal campus. North Carolina has a lot of benefits as well, but certainly, I think there's some people in our family pulling that she just follows the lead of her older brother and sister and goes to the Ohio State University. But
those would be called unofficial visits.
Yes, exactly. So we'll see how that all turns out. But we had a great trip down to North Carolina, and as everybody's experiencing now here, it's been quite a heat wave here this past week. And, before we know it, the guys will be out there on the practice field getting ready for the 2019 season. It's coming. It is hurtling toward us with the speed of a light right now. So, Kevin, I'll go to you for some of your expertise. We were both talking off air about some of the commitments that have been made in terms of recruiting. The most recent one looks like Mookie Cooper, wide receiver, became the 4th national top 100 prospect overall, who is a wide receiver who is committed to Ohio State. I can't think of anything like this in my memory of Ohio State dominating one position on the board in a recruiting class like this.
You'd have to go back to the 2014 class when they brought in the likes of Paris Campbell and Johnny Dixon, and Noah Brown was in that class, and Curtis Samuel, and
Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, Terry McLaurin. They had 5 guys that ended up playing H, wide receiver, whatever in that class. But the difference with this one is, in 14, some of these guys were 3 stars. They weren't Rivals 100 or top 247 guys or whatever, like we see in this class with 4 guys that are in that top 100 designation. And then, of course, you have Cameron Martinez, a guy who can play on offense or defense. It looks like his first opportunity is going to be on defense. I go back to a couple years ago when they put together that defensive tackle class with Antoine Jackson coming over in the JUCO side, Tommy Togiai, Teron Vincent, where they had a real dominating class at one position. But we've never really seen this at receiver the way that it's set up there. And, you have to give all the credit in the world, not only to, Ryan Day as the head coach, but Brian Hartline, and he's being assisted by Keenan Bailey. They've done a great job of putting this class together.
When you think about these wide receivers, and Tony, I'm going to come to you in just 1 second about this group. And as he made a very good point, Cameron Martinez, who they also just got on July 4th as well from Michigan, Muskegon, Michigan, he could be I saw a videotape of him playing running back, wide receiver, and also there's a thought that he could start out as a defensive back at Ohio State. But, that's a year down the line, obviously, to see which way that's going to go. One of the thoughts I think about, 4 wide receivers, and typically Ohio State has played with 3 wide receivers, a running back, and a tight end, but they've got 4 wide receivers committed between Cooper, G. Scott Jr., who with his camp showings is now moving closer and closer to getting, 4 stars and possibly even in the ballpark to maybe one day even be a 5-star. Jackson Smith-Njigba, I hope I pronounced that right. I don't know. Just, Tony, what is your thought when you take 4 guys like that and they each seem to have different disciplines, different ways that they could play at wide receiver? I mean, it's a potential that, 3 of these guys could be on the field together at one time down the line. I don't think anybody's expecting them all to come in and start in 2020, but, 2021, 2022, as Ohio State tries to continue this dynasty or whatever it is you want to call this flow of championship teams that they've built. How do you reconcile how they're going to keep all these guys happy going forward?
Well, it's, you go back to like 2014 when everybody talks about Devin Smith and Michael Thomas and Evan Spencer, but there was also Corey Smith and Jalen Marshall and Dontre Wilson. So that starting 3 was actually a starting 6 that they rotated, and they've continued to rotate. So when you bring in 4 guys, I could see them all on the field together, actually, because they do all do different things. They are all different kinds of players. G. Scott is basically your prototypical X, like your Michael Thomas. Julian Fleming can do anything. He could be a Z who could run your deep routes. I mean, he was the second fastest guy at the opening, the second fastest receiver at the opening, I believe. When I see Jackson Smith-Njigba, I see KJ Hill, like a faster KJ Hill who can play inside or outside. Then Mookie Cooper is your slot guy. They're hoping the Rondale Moore type who can, catch a quick screen and take it a long ways. He fits into the H-back, different kind of H-back than Paris Campbell, different kind than KJ Hill. But that's what they're looking for. He's a perfect complement. They all complement each other really, really well. And I think there's more than enough room for them, because you still got to remember there's Garrett Wilson and there's Jameson Williams in the 2019 class who are going to be freshmen this year. You take those 6, I mean, those 2 classes alone, and then they've got more guys coming in 2021, but just those last 6 guys, that alone is a reason why Cameron Martinez starts on defense. But you talking about Cameron Martinez, you look at his film, and I mentioned it on Twitter when he committed, he reminded me of Antoine Randall L, because you see him at quarterback and he's doing all of these things. And I don't know how many people watching this know who Antoine Randall L was to Indiana, but he was amazing to watch. Right. He was special. And, maybe a more recent comparison would be Jalen Marshall, except I think Cameron Martinez is faster. And for a guy like that to maybe not get a look on offense right away tells you how good this receiver haul is. And Kevin, getting back to when you guys were talking about particular groups of recruits, like a position group where the defensive line in 2017 or 2018, whenever it was, 2018, I could go maybe like the corners in 2017 when you had Okudah, Sean Wade, Kendall Sheffield, Marcus Williamson, and Amir Reap was pretty good. But the one that I go back to is the 2002 linebacker haul of Mike DeAndrea,
going
Mike
old school, I love it.
AJ Hawk, Stan White, and Bobby Carpenter. And, Kudla eventually moved to defensive end. Stan White eventually moved to tight end and fullback. But this receiver group is up there with, you're trying to just figure out best in school history in terms of particular position groups, because obviously they haven't even played a senior season yet, but potentially it's one that you have to, like, where do they rank in OSU history in terms of one group of recruits at a position?
Well, one thing to remember too, I want to jump in talking about the receivers, is they've got 4 guys on scholarship this year that this will be their last year, with KJ Hill, Austin Mack, CJ Saunders, and Ben Victor. So after that, they only have 6 receivers who are on the chart right now. Cameron Babb has not been able to catch a break. He has just been dealing with injury after injury. You have to wonder what his future is going to be. So now we're down to 5. Elijah Gardner, I think this is a show up or maybe portal type of year for him. And I don't like, throwing players out there at this point, but just with everything that's coming behind him. So, even with that, we have Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams, Jaylen Harris, who's another player that has a lot of potential, hasn't broken through yet. And then Chris Olave, who came on late in the season after the injury to Dawson Mack, had 2 touchdowns against Michigan, had 1 against Northwestern. I mean, he's going to be somebody who's very much in the mix. That's why Ohio State's able to go out and take 4 receivers this year, with whatever you want to classify Cameron Martinez is, why they're going to be in good shape in 2021 when they already have Jalen Ballard in the mix. They look like the odds-on favorite to get Marvin Harrison Jr., who's teammates with Kyle McCord out there in Philadelphia. I mean, I think that we're going to see so much turnover with what this receiver room is going to look like when the 20 and 21 classes are in there. And, we're not going to remember the clown show that Urban Meyer talked about when he took over, and the leading receiver at Ohio State having something like 12, 14 receptions, something of, just a really low number. I mean, things are changing.
Yeah, but to be fair, there was 3 receivers with 14 catches, so give them some credit.
It was a clown show. I don't know any other way to put it. It is exciting because these receivers impact the game in a way that when you have a quarterback that can throw the football, they can stretch the field and they can change. I mean, you think about the TCU game last year. Ohio State was it was a nut cruncher, and they hit that little short play to Paris Campbell, and he turned it for 1,000,000 yards, down there in Jerry World, and the game turned on a dime. So when you have guys that can make either catch balls over the top or take short plays and turn them into explosive 30, 40, 50-yard plays, it changes the game immediately. And a guy that we haven't talked about who verbaled on June 21st, Massillon, Washington, Jaden Ballard for 2021, probably one of the top prospects in Ohio for 2021, in the top 5 certainly, and my guess is he's going to be a highly rated wide receiver in that 2021 class as well. Kevin, I'm going to come back to you because this run is not over. We are in what is currently a dead period for college football recruiting. And I think that the NCAA, with the help of coaches everywhere, had mandated that the month of July needs to be a dead period. No visits, no coaches off campus, because everybody needs to have this month to go out, take their kids to the swimming pool, and go on vacation, and et cetera, because everyone knows August 1st, the grind is real, and it goes all the way through the signing period in February until these guys get really any downtime. I mean, it is continual from here. I mean, at Ohio State, you don't even get Thanksgiving off now since they moved the Michigan game to the Thanksgiving weekend about 8 or 10 years ago. So it is a dead period now, but there will be verbal commitments. We've got, I know when we were talking off air, 2 or 3 guys. Kevin, you had some information, I know, about guys who are getting close to making decisions, and Ohio State's got 19 commitments now. And before this month is over, before the beginning of August, before practice for everybody begins, this thing could actually be 21 or 22 commitments.
And actually, the count I think I have them at is 21 with the kicker out of Cincinnati, Seibert, who'll gray shirt this year, so he won't count against these numbers right now. But yeah, they could be very close to the top, and then they can really just swing for the fences on a couple more. One player who hasn't announced a date yet, Court Williams out of California. He looks like he could be a July decision, but for players that have already announced when they're going to make it official, you have Lathan Ransom out of Arizona, a safety. He announces on the 16th. On the 30th of this month, you have Jaylen Knighton, who is an all-purpose back out of Deerfield Beach, South Florida. Things look really good there. And then on August 2nd, you have Bijan Robinson, who's also out of Arizona, one of the nation's top running backs. He'll make his decision at that point. Plus, too, there's some defensive ends that are out there with Kedrick Bingley-Jones, who's supposed to announce on the 3rd. You have Jacoby Cowan, who that might drag into the season. But Ohio State is sitting at the point where they could probably have 4 more commits by, the first week of August.
And what's crazy is, I know on our network, 24/7, we have the crystal ball. I know on Rivals, you guys have
Futurecast.
Yeah, Futurecast, a predictor type thing where people can make predictions. I know that, at least I didn't look on the Rivals one yet, but I know on the 24/7 one, several people have come in over the top on Bijan Robinson to Ohio State. And it was like an epidemic yesterday that's where everybody was going with it. And I think that touched off some real tremors on the Texas message boards. One, about how, now this is an Arizona kid. This isn't Garrett Wilson. This isn't, some of the other Texas.
Okay, Dobbins out of LaGrange or.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, this isn't a homegrown kid, but it's a kid that they want, that they need. And, the comments were like, worked again by Ohio State. Stan Drayton, what's he doing? So on and so forth. Tony, I just get your 2 cents. I mean, what do you make of this, that Urban Meyer's not the head coach at Ohio State anymore, and they're still giving power programs like Texas tremendous fits in terms of recruiting?
Well, and this started a year ago. I remember standing outside of the WAC for Friday Night Lights, which got canceled to the media, and we're all, a few of us are standing out, media members out in the parking lot waiting to talk to players as they came out. And you see Jack Miller, the quarterback who has been committed since July of last year, number 2 pocket passer in the nation from Arizona. You see him giving Ryan Day a big hug in the lobby of the WAC, and it was pretty clearly a commitment hug. But it was him and Ryan Day. It wasn't Jack Miller and Urban Meyer. So this has been a process that began. It's not brand new, but they could, if Lathan Ransom and Bijan Robinson commit, they could have 3 of the top 5 guys in Arizona, Ohio State. So they don't go to Arizona an awful lot, and now that's a hotbed. Washington is a hotbed, with G. Scott, and they had running back Sam Adams out for a visit. There's one of the top players in the nation in 2021 is a defensive lineman out there as well, and they're going to be involved with him. And Court Williams out in California. Urban Meyer has said in the past, like, we're not going to go out to California unless players are serious. And, they've gone to Hawaii, they've gone to California, they've gone to Utah, Idaho. Ryan Day wants it to be a circle around Ohio, and they wants everything to start in Ohio. But the fact that he can go into all of these places, and the Block O gets him in everywhere. It's like a magic key card. It's a fast pass. But the work he's doing to build these relationships, because that's what recruiting is, it's crazy to think that you could just come in and do similar to Urban Meyer. And that's what he's doing in terms of recruiting so far. And we'll see. It's going to be a big class. And so we'll see how it goes. And I know, Steve, we were talking about before the show, some fans are getting a little upset at all of these 3 stars that are committing. But, rest assured, it's going to be a very good class. It's going to be deep. And right now, there's not a lot of concerns or not a lot of missing areas in this class. We talk about defensive line, but they've done so well over the last couple of years, and they've already got Jack Sawyer for 2021. It's not such an issue in this class, in this cycle. And Ryan Day is doing as good as you could hope for, just as he did when he went 3-0 last season. Right now, he's doing as good as you could hope for until the season begins.
Mm-hmm. Let's downshift and go into third gear and look toward next week. The Big Ten Media Days in Chicago. Ryan Day will be there as a first-time head coach, which is kind of interesting in and of itself. And I found myself today, thinking about, okay, they're going to open with Florida Atlantic, and that's not really that exciting of a game. And yet, you remember where you were when Jim Tressel had his first game against Akron, and Urban Meyer, went out there for the first time as a head coach. You remember those moments. And now obviously Day was the acting head coach last year, but now it's his program. And I think it's his term and his time to put his stamp on this program. The question I want I'm going to send out to both of you guys is, okay, we get there next Thursday in Chicago for the Big Ten Media Days. They do a 15-minute session at the podium, and it'll be televised quasi-live by Big Ten Network. They sneak in some commercial breaks in between the guys. And so within 10 or 15 minutes, you're watching what your coach had to say. If it's not live, it's almost live. And then later in the day, they have an hour-long session at another podium in another room where media, it's a less informal situation, and media can pepper the coach with questions. And we won't delve too much back into how that went terribly awry a year ago for one Urban Meyer when he and his good friend Brett McMurphy exchanged pleasantries there in the meeting room in Chicago. Let's forget about that. Let's fast forward to next Thursday. And Kevin, I'm going to go to you right now. What is the number one question you have for Ryan Day going into that session about where things are at with this team going into 2019?
Well, you took my thunder because I was going to say, where's Brett McMurphy? That was going to be my first question.
He won't be there because there's no controversy to sell this year. There's
no. The problem is that I think what everybody wants to know about is going to be the quarterbacks. And I feel like we've asked Ryan Day about the quarterbacks, frontwards, backwards, sideways, any which way that you can. But I think that's the story that everybody wants to know. And it's very interesting to watch how Ohio State went from having quarterbacks to having no quarterbacks to now, granted, Gunnar Hoke is a transfer in, and, they brought in a true freshman who is a preferred walk-on. And, you obviously have Justin Fields, you have Chris Chugunov. I know that they're not out there working with the quarterbacks at this point. We're in the summer; they're expected to do stuff on their own. But either between that or just the progress of where the defense is, we just saw a defense that really was a bit of an anomaly in terms of where Ohio State's been through the years. There's only one coach left standing from last season on that side of the ball with Larry Johnson. He has a nice mixture bringing in Greg Madison from Michigan, but also going to the NFL ranks with Jeff Hafley. Maybe something on the defensive side of, while you're not working with the kids at this point, what have the discussions been on that side of the ball now that you guys have had time to pick apart every single snap that's gone through? I mean, where does your emphasis need to be on that side of the ball once training camp starts? After we go through everybody's favorite and our least favorite days, standing out in front of the hotel, taking pictures, checking into a hotel. Once they get out there on the field, I mean, where is that attention going to be?
No doubt. Tony, he sits down at the table. You have 60 minutes to ask questions, and usually we get into so much depth, and there's also national people there who will ask questions about paying the players and, all these other, pie in the sky. What's your thought about player safety and concussions and all this other stuff, which is very valid, and it's the one chance for national people, as I call them, the Dodds and the 40s to show up and get that issues-oriented column or story in there. Tony, you heard what Kevin said. He wants to drill down on the quarterbacks when he gets a chance to meet face-to-face with Ryan Day. What would be maybe your take that one out of the play? What would be something that you're thinking about?
A lot of times you almost have to wear these guys down because they are talking for an hour. And so maybe about the 40-minute mark, they start to will be a little bit more forthcoming because it does become more conversational. But I would like to know maybe what have they had to scrap, or what have they discovered in terms of the defense is what I'm most interested in. And, what did they think they're going to be able to do, but maybe it didn't come to pass and they're going to have to do something else. Was it a particular player that they were relying on? But then again, he's not going to throw anybody under the bus. And that's one of my issues. One of the things I'm wondering, what will we find out about Ryan Day? Because when Urban Meyer came in, one of the refreshing things was we got answers on players, on personnel. Jim Tressel would talk a lot, but wouldn't necessarily say anything. Urban Meyer comes in with all of this cachet, and he can say the receivers were a clown show. He can say this player needs to step up or he's not going to play. Ryan Day doesn't necessarily have that yet. He's trying to build his relationships with his players his own way. I don't know that I wouldn't expect him to say, if Luke Farrell doesn't step up, he's going to go to the back of the line. I think he's going to be very safe with his answers. And unfortunately, an hour of safe doesn't make for a lot of interesting answers, because I feel like we all know pretty much what Ryan Day is going to say to almost every answer. But then also the changing landscape of college football, we've seen with the transfer portal where he will talk about it earlier in the spring and then go talk to other coaches about it, and all of these other scenarios come out. And then we talk to him a month later and he's like, he has a little bit of a different answer because he's learning on the fly about all of this, all about being a head coach in college football. So he's learning, he's providing some different perspectives or gaining new and different perspectives. So maybe maybe an answer we could get is what's different than what you expected, or what did you know? What have you learned as head coach? Those kinds of things. And I'm sure he'll be asked that. I would like to get more into the personnel and the minutia because that's what interests me, but he's not going to go there too much.
I would agree with you. I think it's going to be somewhere between Tressel and Meyer in terms of the candidness. I think at times Coach Day has been very forthright, very candid with some of the answers that we've seen from him. And I am interested to see how he handles a full hour of this next Thursday. I'll share mine, taking the quarterbacks off. I would drill down a little bit on the defense, because that was the undoing of this team, of this great 13-1 team last year. Their undoing was defense. We talk about them like they were 7-6. And the three of us lived it. We were at all 13 stops, and we know how pathetically bad the defense was in so many of these games, and how many records they set that are just ridiculously awful for Ohio State. It's got to be – I don't think anybody's expecting like 96 defense where they held people to like 11 points or something for the year, but I think people are saying, hey, this has got to be much better. That's one for me is what makes you think this is going to be so much better. And I think the other one for me, and I'm interested to get your guys' thoughts on this, is the offensive line. Thayer Munford, I talked to his high school coach when he was there for one of the camps, Nate Moore, and he seemed to say that Thayer was close to 100%. So I don't think we have to worry too much about him at left tackle being 100% by August 31st. It sounds like his recovery plan has worked out perfectly. His back issue seems to be, receding, whatever, although he didn't do a lot of working out, you would think, during the off season, whatever he could handle. Offensive line, this guy from Rutgers, Jackson, has he assimilated? Is he as good as you thought he was going to be? Is he a hard worker? Is he a leader? Is he ready to start? I mean, he started at Rutgers, Flounder could have started at Rutgers on the offensive line. So, is he going to fill a spot? Where's he at? Where's this 5-man unit? I'll throw it back to you guys. Offensive line, if they can't protect Fields, if they can't give him a clean pocket to throw out of, I would be concerned about how good he's going to be as a thrower. And if he's not good to great as a thrower, they'll take the runaway eventually. You've got to be able on 3rd and 13 to throw a pass beyond the sticks and complete it and move the sticks. And to me, we don't know that yet with this kid, and we don't know that yet with this offensive line as it's going to be reconstituted. So I'll throw it out there to you guys, your comfort level with the offensive line.
I think they're going to be there. I like Jonah Jackson. I mean, he was an all Big Ten performer. I agree that, Rutgers has been a little challenged in football for about 150 years. It's not been
they showed that Rutgers Louisville game on Big Ten Network the other day, the one meaningful game from 06. What's our guy who just left here? The defense, Shiano's great stand, and with that high shot from the helicopter when they beat Louisville, and both teams were in the top 10 somehow. I don't know how. It was playing in the Big East. Those people at High Point, whatever they call that, they came from every direction onto the field, and that high shot, I mean, that was amazing. That was the one moment in time, November of 2006 for Rutgers football. I had to throw that in there just because we got to give them their credit, guys. That
greatest moment in New Jersey history.
Exactly. Well, better than the Jersey Shore, I'll say that. I mean, but I think Jonah Jackson's going to step into one of the guard positions along with Wyatt Davis. Wyatt Davis had his opportunity last year, late in the season, and I mean, I thought he looked pretty good. And with another year and it being his position, I think they're going to be fine there. Josh Myers is going to step into that center role. There were a lot of people talking about, well, I mean, he hadn't been able to lock it down before or whatnot. Why is it going to be different? Every person I've talked to around the program off the record is just gushed about how Myers is. I think he'll get a nice push from true freshman Harry Miller, who will be behind him, who I think is going to be the center of the future. But, he's going to be there. I think really my question is going to be, that right tackle position. Who's going to step into that spot? Is it going to be Nick Petit-Frere and his 8,000 calories a day and 14 meals and waking up in the middle of the night? Is it going to be Brandon Bowen, returning after, obviously a very significant broken leg that required multiple surgeries? I mean, he was a starter at guard, but he was also the third tackle on the team. I mean, he definitely looks more like a tackle. He has a tackle body. I mean, he's in his final year. He has a new wife. He has a baby. This is a contract year for him. If football is going to continue, he has to be out there. I mean, you got Joshua Alabi too. I mean, he's somebody else who stepped into a role last year due to injuries and whatnot. So, I mean, I think there's going to be some opportunities out there, but I think the line is going to show up. I think that we're going to see them. It's not going to be an overnight thing. I don't think we're going to see them against FAU, gangbusters destroying everybody. I don't think we'll see it. I think we'll take until October until we really can start to see this line's potential. But I think you can say that about a lot of schools. You look at the Big Ten across the board. There are very few schools that are returning more than one or two offensive linemen, and Ohio State has the depth. So I think they're going to be fine.
Yeah, even if it's only one returning starter on paper, Bowen has starting experience. Jackson obviously has starting experience. Tony, I'll just get your quick thought, what you think about the offensive line before we move on to, I think we've got one or two more topics we want to hit, and we don't want to take all night, obviously, but just anything burning thought you have about the offensive line.
Yeah, I think they will be better than they were last year because I like the talent better. And you mentioned, all of these returning starters who aren't starters but are. I would even throw Wyatt Davis in there, who started in the Big Ten championship game, then was the starter for all of bowl camp and started against Washington, then was the starter for all of spring camp and will be the starter for all of fall camp. So to me, he is I remember talking to him at the bowl game or in the spring, because of this experience, do you feel like a returning starter? And he feels like he is a returning starter. And he's a really smart kid too. He's down to earth, and he I expect him to be fine. I wasn't a huge fan of last year's offensive line. You can look at the running game for why I wasn't, but I'm not sure Michael Jordan was ever really the right fit at center. Yes, he was an All-American, but they need that guy, as Urban Meyer used to call it the apex of the offense. And I see Josh Myers more in that mentality where he's down and dirty. And I don't know that Michael Jordan was ever really that, I guess, angry. And I think Josh Myers can be that guy. And I like the interior of what, Jonah Jackson, we all agree, can probably do pretty well. Brandon Bowen, is he the sixth guy? Is he the utility guy that you can put anywhere? So I really like this group, and I assume Nick Petit-Frere will be fine as a redshirt freshman starter. I think by November they could be the best group in the Big Ten, and that's saying something when you've got Michigan bringing back 4 starters and plenty of other Wisconsin. All right, they won't be as good as Wisconsin, but I think they could be. I think they could be really, really good, and not a huge concern.
All right. So we have talked quite a bit about concerns for this team, what we'd asked Ryan Day next week when we see him in Chicago. Another storyline for Chicago next week is Ohio State is taking 3 of its seniors. And this is kind of an interesting thing. I want to say it was Dan Wetzel or somebody else on Twitter. Could have been Dodd. I don't know who, but somebody took the Big Ten schools to task because the frontline guys that you think about with the Big Ten, which would be a Shea Patterson at Michigan, Chase Young at Ohio State, and so many other guys down the line will not be there. What this has become is let's recognize our seniors who have put their time into the program and may not make such sexy copy for the people who are there. I mean, if Shea Patterson was there, that alone would be a great interview for anybody. And certainly Chase Young is potentially the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pick in the NFL draft. It's the same thing with Nick Bosa. I don't believe, he ever made an appearance in Chicago. Obviously, he wasn't there last year. So for whatever reason, everybody's got to send their 3 program seniors to this thing instead of the guys who are your best players, who are the 3-and-done guys, And I even made a comment on Twitter. It's like, okay, send those 3 guys so they get their due, but throw us a bone. As Mike Myers, Austin Powers, throw us a freaking bone. Send the 3-and-done top half of the first round draft guy. Nick Bosa should have been there last.
For you with the whole Urban Meyer thing, though, I mean, do we really? Oh,
we had more than we could handle last year.
I remember driving over there, and everything was happening with Zach Smith's employment and whatnot. I don't think I could have handled Nick Bosa or Shea Patterson or Jesus Christ being there at that point. I had my hands were full.
Let's also not forget the 2015 season where we get to media day, and that's when the suspensions come down for Joey Bosa and Corey Smith and all of those guys. Sometimes, Steve, a boring media day isn't so bad.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm just saying, when you have a Chase Young and you're trying to sell tickets and you're trying to drum up excitement for the season, or a Shea Patterson or whoever else, those guys should be there. Okay, let's put that aside.
How about Steve, real quick? How about if the media gets to pick one player from each team, like that beat, gets to nominate somebody? Jerry Emig, OSU's SID, can send whatever 3, or Ryan Day can pick whatever 3 he wants, but then we get a pick too.
We get one spot. That's hilarious. That's never going to happen. But I agree with you. You follow what I'm saying. It's like, you go there and it's nice to talk to, these guys who are great kids. And what I'm getting at is the leadership on this team to kind of shift a gear. Jordan Fuller, Jonathan Cooper, and KJ Hill were the three guys selected from Ohio State. And that tells you from the coaching staff who's working the hardest, who's got the best leadership capability, who's handled their business in the classroom. As Coach Meyer used to say when he was the head coach, you had that elite top 10%, you had the 70 or 80% in the middle, and then you had the 10% at the bottom. Obviously, these three guys are in that top 10% of their scholarship players, where they wouldn't have been selected for this at Ohio State. So just a thought from you guys about those three guys, Fuller, Cooper, and Hill. And if you had to branch out from those three, who else in your mind is a charismatic guy who ought to be a captain on this 2019 team?
I'll jump.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say it's always good talking to Robert Landers. He's always a good answer. He has a good time with it.
Out the yazoo. Yes, what a great kid.
And he enjoys it. And a lot of times that's the key is players enjoying it. Some players don't want to talk to the media. And that's fine. I don't blame them. The answers we get are very bland, and you can tell they don't want to be there. Robert Landers would talk for his hour and then hang out for somebody else's hour and just continue to talk and give you good stuff and interesting stuff and insights that you don't always get from players, because this is a guy who has come from, he's a 5'6" nose tackle. All right. So he's a very different kind of cat. But Cooper, Fuller, KJ Hill, we've talked to them so often, and this doesn't surprise any of us. I don't think. Jordan Fuller is a 2-time academic All-American. He'll give you exactly what you want. KJ Hill kind of came back to be a captain and take part in this. So these are all, like you said, rewards, and good for them, great for them. We will spend an hour talking to each of them, and we'll get what we can. But I wouldn't mind seeing Robert Landers or, like you said, Chase Young. It's always talking to Chase Young after bowl games when he's talking about what he wants to do next year. And I want 10 sacks. I want 12 sacks. I want to set school records is always fun. And maybe getting him for an hour would be interesting as well.
Kev, what do you thought about these three guys and any other leadership potential type guys on this team?
Yeah, I think that these guys, first and foremost, you're not going to get a lot of message board, bulletin board material out of them. They've all played the game long enough. They've all gone through the Jerry Emig, media desensitization symposium. They're not going to say anything too wild. That's why I'd like to see someone like Damon Arnett, because we've talked so much about Damon Arnett and how does Jeff Hafley feel about him. He's kind of been a little bit of a lightning rod for fans in terms of maybe some issues that he's had on the field in terms of just not being in the right position, being a little handsy out there. But a guy that I guarantee you that we're going to get next year, because he personifies everything that coaches like to send to this, hard worker, does everything the right way, and doesn't say a darn thing. Get ready, 2020. Tough Borland in Chicago. We absolutely are going to get Tough Borland next year.
So there you go.
I was a little surprised we didn't get him this year.
Yeah. I'm looking at my Phil Steele depth chart here. Austin Mack is a senior. I think he's got some great leadership potential at wide receiver. Brandon Bellman has been through the ringer the last 18 months with the injuries and everything, and he'll be a senior. And I know we'll get a chance during the course of preseason camp to sit down and talk with him. But his story, when he tells it, of everything that he's gone through, and then his personal life, getting married and everything else that's going on, it's a tremendous story for him. So I think that's kind of interesting. Malik Harrison is going to be nothing but a freak, I think, for Ohio State at the outside linebacker position. So I'd look for him as well. So those are some of the guys I look to. KJ Hill has an opportunity to go down as one of the top receivers in Ohio State history in terms of catches, I believe. So he is going, and maybe receiving yards is too, I'm not sure. but he's going to set some records, obviously, this year. So it'll be cool kind of talking to him. And J.K. Dobbins, when we get that moment, he doesn't say a whole lot. He doesn't buy in to all the media and say a lot of hyperbole. Usually you get pretty truthful answers out of J.K. Dobbins, but he's got a chance. I read that if he has a really big year, which he potentially could, since he'll be the lead back, he could push 1,500, 1,600 yards perhaps if he stays healthy and they play like they're capable. He could end up second to Archie Griffin perhaps in the end in terms of rushing yards. So that's kind of an interesting thought as well. So there's some other guys. Let's move off of that and let's wrap this thing up with our thoughts about the wide receiver position. We did the linebacker position last week. We've already talked about wide receiver recruiting, but that doesn't, and you did touch a little bit about some of the guys they're going to have on the field this year. But when you talk about the split end position, the flanker position, and the H receiver position, those are the three guys who do the heavy lifting in this offense. Blocking, receiving, everything else that happens with this offense. I mean, we have seen what Campbell and McLaurin and Dixon and those guys have done in the past years, and the Michael Thomases, Evan Spencers, and the guys Devin Smith before them. Does this three-man unit, and they're going to go much deeper than that, but you start with KJ Hill, who I talked about a minute ago, as one, Austin Mack as another, and then Benjamin Victor, the Randy Moss kind of, play alike, look alike, just throw it up there and I'll go get it type guy. Does this three-man unit, I'll throw this out to Gerd first, does this three-man unit strike any fear in the heart of opponents?
In Ohio State's offense, they should, and that's what we saw with KJ Hill with 75, 78, 74 catches last year for over 800 yards. With another 50 catches this year, will set the all-time OSU receptions record. I think, Benjamin Victor, we saw that Penn State catch is an example. That catch and run is an example of what he can do. And Urban Meyer said he had more potential than any receiver he's ever had. Does that all come into play? Does that all fall into place this year? Probably not, but 75% of that would be pretty good and better than most receivers in the Big Ten. Austin Mack, I think, was going to take that next step last year before he got hurt. He's a guy who kept Benjamin Victor on the bench a little bit in terms of because they were sharing the position and Mack was playing so well. So now that they're kind of playing on the same playing together basically at the X and the Z. We'll see how long that lasts. But I also really like the depth. And I think Jalen Gill, we haven't talked about him yet tonight, and I think he could be a star pretty quickly at H because they are going to rotate KJ Hill and CJ Saunders and Jalen Gill. And Gill is one of the 2 or 3 most explosive players in this offense possibly. And, we saw Chris Olave, just a glimpse of what he can do, and I think we'll see more. And Garrett Wilson, I think we're all in on how much can you get out of a freshman. I think Austin Mack, Benjamin Victor, and KJ Hill is as good of a trio as there is in the Big Ten, right up there with Michigan, with Black and Donovan Peoples-Jones and Nico Collins. But it's Ohio State's depth and sets them apart from everyone else.
Mm-hmm. I did a chat on our site this past week, and people asked about the wide receiver position. Kevin, I'll come to you. Phil Steele, in his book, which we all consider the Bible, he had Purdue #1 with Rondale Moore, and you could put a couple mannequins beside Rondale Moore, I presume, and you have a great wide receiver group. He had Ohio State 2 and then Michigan 3, I believe. I think he had Ohio State just ahead of Michigan. To me, Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's amazing. I mean, some of the things that he's done at Michigan. You mentioned Nico Collins, Gerd. What's your thought about that, Kevin? And maybe, okay, I asked Tony about the top 3, but you get beyond that with an Olave, a Garrett Wilson, who nobody has seen, a Jalen Gill, who nobody has seen, Jaylen Harris, who we haven't seen much of either, CJ Saunders. We're now 8 or 9 deep. We are 3 deep at each position, X, Y, and H. What is your thought about that, Kev?
Yeah, Ohio State will have 10 scholarship receivers this year as I look at my handy-dandy chart. I mean, one of them, Cameron Babb, we already know that that's not going to happen this year, but they do have a lot of depth, and I think that's going to be great within this offense. I mean, we're not going to see the same type of prolific throw game that we saw with Dwayne Haskins, but that's not what we necessarily need to see. But with that being said, we're not going to have a situation to where the big three, that with Hill, Mack, and Victor are going to have to carry 80% of the mail. I mean, you're going to have Garrett Wilson. You got, a true freshman who was a summer enrollee with Jameson Williams, who, I think that if he's given an opportunity, he's somebody who can make an immediate impact. You talk about Jaylen Harris, that big body out there. Ohio State has not had a lot of those 6'4" type of receivers. I mean, they've recruited some through, recent years. I mean, obviously we can go back to Trevon Grimes, who is going to be a heck of a player at Florida, but a lot of these guys hadn't necessarily worked out. I think that they're going to have the right guys in the right positions, and I think that these guys are all going to flourish. And I think we're going to see Ohio State, definitely in there in that top 2, top 3 in the Big Ten type of rankings for their receivers. Yeah, as you talked about Rondale Moore and a couple mannequins, I was kind of struggling coming up with any other Purdue receivers. It was just all kind of PTSD of what Moore was able to do.
Kevin, you talk about Jameson Williams. You go watch that guy's highlights. It looks like Ted Ginn, and they don't have room for him this year. So that gives you an idea of how deep they are at each of those 3 receiver positions.
Yep. The potential is phenomenal at that position. Guys, I think we filled up about an hour of airtime here, and we hijacked Mark's channel. He wasn't able to be here tonight, our fearless leader. I'm sure he'll be back with us. And I know next week, because we'll all be in Chicago or heading to Chicago on Wednesday, we will want to do this probably on Tuesday night. So if you follow us on a weekly recurring basis, or even if you're watching this as a replay, we will try and do this live. We're going to think about this for next Tuesday night, because of the meetings in Chicago, and we'll all be in transit. But one thought that just occurred to me, and I think we talked about Florida Atlantic in one of the previous things, is Cincinnati in week 2. And I'm just going to throw this out there as our homework for this week. Our friend Luke Fickell, and geez, what did we spend with him? Probably 15 years as an assistant coach, and I covered him 3-4 years as a player. So that's most of my adult life I've spent around Luke Fickell, and respect everything that he's done, and certainly the job he's done in Cincinnati. What are the things, and we can talk about this in an upcoming edition, what are the things when they are doing their workouts down at Cincinnati that you think he is driving that team about, we're going to go play at Ohio Stadium, and they think they're a top 5 team, and we went to the Rose Bowl last year, and I know, Kevin, you're going to say we beat a really bad UCLA team, but conjure in your mind, what would it take for Cincinnati to pull off that upset in game 2? And I think that's something that we can talk about. It's probably unlikely to happen, obviously. I would think Ohio State's at least a 17 to 21 point favorite over Cincinnati. But stranger things have happened. You have a rookie head coach in Day, essentially. I don't know, just kind of an interesting thing that he harnessed something at Cincinnati. They went from 5 wins the year before, 6, whatever it was, to 10 or 11, beat Virginia Tech in the bowl game too. Could they rise up in one day and beat Ohio State in Ohio Stadium? Probably unlikely, but what would it take? And maybe that'll be our homework assignment for this week. So everybody, maybe we'll talk to Mark, and maybe next week we'll hit that one. Is Cincinnati? What are the byproducts of that game, and what do you expect? Because it's their Super Bowl. They don't play a bigger game. They could play a top 15 team in the bowl game, and it's not any bigger than playing Ohio State in Ohio Stadium in week 2. So for those kids who didn't get Ohio State scholarship offers, and they're capable, 11 wins, beat UCLA, beat Virginia Tech, gave Central Florida a pretty good game for about a half. I don't know. We'll talk about that in depth next week. Guys, any parting shots? That was my parting shot is let's don't get so hyped up about Penn State and Michigan and these other games down the line. You got to win game 1, game 2, game 3, game 4 along the way.
Well, I would, with that in mind, I wonder how much Luke Fickell can put on the Ohio State game when they do have UCLA coming in. And so they'll have to be compartmentalized as well. But yeah, that's their Super Bowl. That's what they'll be worried about. And I think Ryan Day and will have to get his team aware of that, make them aware of that. And I think that's one, when you look at the schedule, you look at Nebraska, you look at this, you look at that, but don't forget about Cincinnati, definitely.
Parting
Ted
shot.
Dog, any parting shot from you? It doesn't have to be about Cincinnati. It can be about anything else that's going on in your realm covering Ohio State.
No, not really. That's too fast. Stay gold, Pony Boy. Stay gold. That's all I got.
All right, guys. Hey, I think we did it. Over an hour of Ohio State talk, and I'm going to let Mark take this back over hopefully next Tuesday, because this was fun, but I think he's much more adept and polished at running this thing. So, guys, thanks for participating, and thanks everybody for watching. And we will see you likely next Tuesday as a special time next Tuesday. Thanks again.
Well done, Steve.